This is part 3 of The Curse of Christmas, and it has to do with the Herodian family. Now, what we're going to do first of all is remind you of the order of events and some of the various things that happened to these people, and then we will actually get into the scriptural history, the narrative involving many of these people. First of all, between 100 BC to 0, there was a fellow by the name of Antipas. He was the patriarch of the Herodian clan. Antipas was an Idumean, which means that he was the son or grandson, great-great-grandson of Esau. Now immediately we get the feel here of what's going to happen in the family. The Idumeans, or those of the Edomites, were related to the Jews. Jacob and Esau were twin brothers, and they came out of the womb together, but Esau despised his birthright, and it was passed to Jacob, the progenitor of the Jews. And so therefore, we have a tension immediately. Now, even though Antipas was an Arab, he was forced to be a Jew religiously, because he was born and was raised during a time of Jewish nationalism, which simply means that a Seleucid king, a Grecian king by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes, came down to the temple, captured it, offered a sow on the altar, threw the blood around the temple, and the family of Hashmon, which included the Maccabean family, came in and recaptured the temple and drove these guys out. And from then on, they started capturing the lands round about Jerusalem and the Palestine. And Antipas was engulfed in this rise of Jewish nationalism, so that even though he was an Arab, he was forced to become religiously a Jew or suffer persecution. So there we have the tension immediately between the Jews and the Arabs, between one whose family despised the birthright and one to whom it rightfully belonged. Now, Antipas had a son by the name of Antipater. Now, Antipater was a man who played a great part in history. Actually, he was appointed governor of the Jews before his son Herod the Great. He earned millions of dollars. Now, we're talking about people who were true business people. They earned a profit. I'm just going to get on my soapbox here. It absolutely makes me boiling mad to see the United States of corporate America diminish. We need big industry in America. We need big business in America. We need steel mills and factories. That's what we need in America in order to compete. We need it to make a profit. I'm not talking millions of dollars, but billions of dollars worth of profit. I don't care what they do in third world countries. America needs to make a profit in its corporate world. But that's okay. That's my soapbox for the day. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you as our economy folds and the big corporations begin to fail and people have to take jobs like flipping hamburgers instead of making 10 and 15 and 20 and 50 and $100 an hour. May God make it so in America. We need strong America. And these people made millions and millions of dollars. Herod the Great was worth over $100 million himself. Nothing wrong with that. Jesus Christ owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, the wealth in every mine. And nothing wrong with him owning this business of we have to think of taking less. You know, if you're a billionaire, you can't live lavishly. That's nonsense. You ever think of what heaven looks like? Gates of pearl? Streets of gold? Come on. And anyway, that's going to be coming up for the next year, because we've been doing the books here at our church, and it's phenomenal to me how that the people want and say, and got to have this and got to have that, and they don't give. Well, that's okay. As we see America diminish, Merry Christmas is going to happen to our kids the way it happened to these kids. Anyway, Antipater was a genius, and Julius Caesar pronounced him to be governor of Judea. And he ruled, actually, because he helped Pompey come on down, and he accommodated the Romans as they came on down to Israel. And so therefore he was appointed governor of Judea. He was the first one as such to have such an appointment. But Antipater had 5 children: Phasael, Joseph, Pharoras, Herod the Great, and Salome the first. And historically she is not known as the first, but we've just done this by way of accommodation. Anyway, the most famous of them all is Herod the Great. And Herod the Great is a man who is significant in history, not just because of the biblical record, but because he had a beautiful old sin nature. He was a genius. He was a fellow who could attract people to him. Now, as I said last time, Herod the Great was pronounced King of the Jews 3 times. One time, in the first triumvirate, we have Julius Caesar getting in trouble in Egypt, and Herod the Great went over to his parents, his mom's side of the family. They were Nabateans, and they were Arabian horsemen, and they were fierce fighters. So he said, look, Julius Caesar's in trouble down there in Egypt. Would you come and help me? And so he brought a contingent of Arabian horsemen and rescued Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar said to Herod the Great, you are now king of the Jews. All right, he was raised with a fellow by the name of Antony, Mark Antony of Cleopatra fame. And one time the Hashmoneans revolted against him, and he got out. It's significant that Herod the Great escaped Jerusalem through the Dung Gate. But that's what he did. He went up to Rome and he said, Antony, look here, the Hashmoneans have revolted against me, and I need an army. Mark Antony went to the Roman Senate and said, look, this is my friend. He's a good ruler in Jerusalem. They said, you're king of the Jews. Here's money and here's some soldiers. Go down there. And 3 years later, he was ruling as king of the Jews again. And then one day, Mark Antony said, in the second triumvirate, I'm going to fight against Augustus Caesar. And Herod said, here's the money. You did me a favor, and I'm going to do you a favor. So he bought his naval vessels for him to fight against Caesar Augustus, the same guy in the Bible. And so they were fighting there, and the reason that he was not on board the boat fighting against Caesar Augustus was because Cleopatra saw him. Now, Herod the Great was a beautiful, beautiful man. He had a beautiful old sin nature. He was a genius, but not only that, he had all of the outer accoutrements to go with a so-called athletic type and image. And she just absolutely, her heart flipped. And she said, would you come down here and we'll have an orgy for about a month? And he said, no, thank you. And he remained true to his friend Antony. Well, Cleopatra didn't like that, and she would not allow him to sail with them. But it saved his life, because in the Battle of Actium, Caesar Augustus defeated Antony. Antony and Cleopatra were dead. But Herod the Great found himself in another problem. He was on the losing side again. So he happened to make some friends with the Rhodians because he built them some cities and so forth. And he came up to the island of Rhodes where Caesar Augustus was, and he said, look, I need to be reintroduced to Caesar Augustus here. So his Rhodian friends came in and said, Caesar, this is Herod the Great. And Herod said, wait, before you say anything, I remain loyal to Antony. He said, I must admit, if Cleopatra hadn't been mad at me, I would have been there fighting against you. But now he's dead. Don't think of me as your enemy. Think of the loyalty. Think of me as one who is loyal to a friendship, whose friend I will now be if you'll just pronounce me King of the Jews. So he brought out the robe, put on the crown, and said, this is the King of the Jews. So 3 times he was pronounced King of the Jews. And that's why whenever the Magi came down there and said, where is he that is born King of the Jews? He said, well, what do you mean? I'm on the throne. I'm King of the Jews 3 times by the Roman Senate. You have to recognize that. Anyway, Herod the Great is the one who started a family curse. Now, what's the family curse, and how does it relate to Christmas? Well, the commandments say, don't make any gods before me. Don't fashion them by way of ornaments or idols. Bow down thyself to them and serve them. Now why? Because I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. And you'll remember that we associated the word jealousy with Ashtaroth, the deity who was worshipped under the trees. This is where you get your Christmas tree. In the after service, I'm going to read a little card I got on the legend of the Christmas tree. So sweet. How the little Christmas tree got its duties. Well, I want to tell you that the Bible tells us all about the Christmas tree. How you put little images in the tree and you burn candles or incense to them, and then you pray to these little deities and you look under the tree for your blessings. Isn't that familiar? It's in the Bible. And I know many are saying, "Oh, pastor's just a bah humbug." You bet your bottom dollar. Not because Christmas, the true spirit of Christmas is wrong, but simply because you've got multiplied millions of children looking under the tree for blessings instead of looking to Jesus Christ for the source of true blessing. And in that I say, bah humbug, who needs it? Now, Herod the Great was the guy who started the family curse for them. Why? Because it says, "I will pour judgment to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me." Now, the Herodian curse started with Herod the Great in the fact that he hated Jesus Christ. When did it start? The first Christmas. Now, it started actually earlier than that with the tug of war between Esau and Jacob and these two groups of people. But Herod the Great was the man who started this curse. Now, Herod the Great had 10 wives. Only 5 are significant to history. Doris the Arabian, whose son was Herod's firstborn Antipater. Mariamne the Jew gave him Alexander and Aristobulus. Mariamne the second gave him Herod Philip. Now she is known as the Bethesian. Malthake, she is a Samaritan woman. And Cleopatra of Jerusalem, she was a Jew. Now, these women are very, very significant, simply because some of them he banished, some of them he killed, and most all the time he was involved and embroiled in an argument with them. And Malthake gave him Archelaus and Herod Antipas. Cleopatra gave him Philip. Now, the 5th child of Antipater II was Salome. She was Herod's sister. The Bible Salome got her name from her grandmother, Salome. And she gave the world 2 kids, Antipater and Bernice the first. All right, now, let me just talk about some of these wives first of all. Doris was a real nag. And she was an Arabian, and of course she was living with a king who wanted to be king of the Jews. And she believed in being loyal to her own nationality, and there was some strife there. So Herod just simply had her banished. Now, we do not know where she went, what happened to her. All of a sudden, Herod awakened the next morning and she was gone from his side. And Antipater as well proved a real source of contention, her son, to Herod. In fact, Herod's last official action as king was to kill Antipater, the son of Doris. For 1 year he had suffered, but they brought him back to his palace in Jerusalem where he was going to try one more case in his weakened condition. He didn't think he was going to die. Antipater and his friends did not realize that Herod was not dead, and they let Antipater out of jail because Herod had placed him there. Antipater came into the room where Herod the Great was seated, and his last official action as he fell off the throne was to point his finger at Antipater and say to the guards, "Kill that person." And he fell off the throne, rolled down the steps, and began bleeding. And the son began bleeding, and the blood of the father and the son mingled together on the floor of that courtroom. That's the curse, you see. He hated Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ hates his children as well. There's sort of a reciprocal agreement here. All right? Mariamne the First, she was one of the most beautiful women in the ancient world. She was a Jewess. Now you remember last time I said that he married Mariamne simply for expedience sake. The Hashmoneans, and she was of the house of Hashmon, were revolting against him, and so what better way to bring peace to the family? I'll marry the daughter. Now he made a mistake with Mariamne. He fell in love with her. It's the only woman that Herod truly loved. But because of her mom, Alexandra, of course she had the mother-in-law, the daughter, and these two sons eventually living together in the palace, although he did send them to the Roman court to be raised and so forth. When they were together, they fussed and fumed, and he was always in suspicion of them. Therefore, both Alexander and Aristobulus were eventually strangled by their father, and Mariamne was killed as well. She was executed because he blamed Mariamne for having an affair with his brother Joseph, who always seemed to turn up every time that Mariamne was in the palace there. Joseph always seemed to be her escort. And so he suspicioned that there was something going wrong, so he had them all killed. Now, Mariamne too gave him Herod Philip. And Herod Philip is an important man because he was the one who was first married to Herodias. Now, last time, I'm not sure if I said Herod Philip was the tetrarch. Actually, Philip of Cleopatra was the tetrarch of Bible fame. But Herod Philip is important because John the Baptist said that Herodias was his true wife. And Herod Antipas actually stole Herodias from Herod Philip and married her. Now here's what happened. Herod the Great said to Mariamne too, getting a little tired of all of this arguing as well, but I'm tired of having the reputation of a son killer. You see, Caesar Augustus said this, and it's a little play on words in the Greek. Concerning Herod, he said, Weos. I'd rather be the pig of Herod than Weos, than the son of Herod. And so that became quite a thing around the Roman Empire regarding Herod. Weos, it's a play on words. I'd rather be his pig than his son. Why? Because his pigs live longer than his sons. So he says to Mariamne, look, we're fighting here. I'm going to give Herod Philip a couple of $1 million. He can go to Rome. You can go with him, live out the rest of your lives there. While in Rome, this beautiful redhead, the most beautiful woman of the ancient world, even prettier than Cleopatra, came in, and Herod Philip said, who is that beautiful redhead? Don't you know? That's your niece. And he said, yes, that's fine, and he married her. Well, Herod Antipas came up and said, is that your wife, at a party one time in Rome? And Herod Philip said, yes. And from that time forward, Herod Antipas, the fox, Jesus called him so, outsmarted and outwitted Herod Philip and went home with Herodias, the most beautiful woman of the ancient world. Okay? But from Herod Philip and Herodias came one of the more famous women, should I say infamous. Her name was Salome. What did she do? She could really dance. She danced in front of Herod Antipas, her stepfather, and asked for the head of John the Baptist. Now, you get the intrigue here of what's happening. Who told her to ask for the head of John the Baptist? Her mother, Herodias. You see, Merry Christmas. Death, destruction is all involved in the very first Christmas, and it's simply because that Herod the Great, as we'll see probably in the after service, simply wanted to destroy the child. What do we do today in modern day Christmas? We want to destroy the child or neutralize him. Keep him a baby under the tree. Make him a figurine that you put on the tree with the rest of the venerated saints and images. Christmas, in my opinion, for the most part, now again, we're not fanatics here. We don't, go off half-cocked and that sort of thing. We're not fanatics. Of course, we can celebrate Christmas and so forth. We understand why we're doing it. But I'm telling you why the world is doing it. And if you have the same spirit of Christmas that the world has, nothing but an idolater. Plain and simple. It's idolatry. It is doing nothing but appeal to the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And all you have to do is watch the commercials, and you'll see that, the materialism that's involved. See, there's a hard thing, isn't it? Here's a pastor who says, don't want materialism, and then he says, want materialism. That's difficult, and God has given us almost an impossible task. Within the system, it's all right to advance and be promoted and get rewarded with material goods. But apart from his system, without capacity, it is not. And so when I talk about the lust of the flesh, I'm talking that the world has no capacity for material things, and therefore they simply want them without the capacity, and that is idolatry, or just sheer lust. Okay, so the fourth, Herod Philip then goes off to Rome, and he never rules. Herod makes sure of that. Malthaki then is a Samaritan woman. She gives the world Archelaus. Now, who was Archelaus? Quickly, he was the one who ruled after Herod's death. Why didn't he rule very long? It's just a matter there of about 6-8 years or so that he ruled. It was because he was inept. And he kept on provoking the Jews, doing things just to irritate them. So the Jews went up to Augustus Caesar and said, you better get that guy out of there because we're going to revolt. And so Archelaus was banished to Gaul, which he had a lot of. He was banished to Gaul, and we never hear from him again. Herod Antipas, though, came from Malthaki. And Herod was the fella who beheaded John the Baptist, and as we'll see in the after service, faced Jesus Christ one-on-one. You know why he faced Jesus Christ? Same reason people want to bring up the name of Jesus Christ at Christmas once a year. He was the emotional type. He was the sentimental type. I killed John the Baptist, and maybe this is John the Baptist resurrected, and he's doing wonderful works, and maybe I can see a miracle performed of him, and maybe John the Baptist will forgive me. Maybe this is the reincarnation of John. I don't know. But he was glad to see Jesus and asked him many questions. Imperfect linear action sort. He kept on asking him question after question after question after question. You know what the Bible says? Jesus answered him not a word. There's a living human being that Jesus Christ said, I don't care if you go to hell or not. I am not going to talk to you. You beheaded the very voice of the forerunner of the Messiah, and for that, and because your heart is not genuine, you don't want to see me because I'm Messiah. You want to see me perform a trick. And that's what Christmas is about. It's about a little baby and this sentimental story, and how the little baby came to Bethlehem and so forth, and how it's so cute and cuddly and the rest of it, and how this baby, the miracle of Christmas. They don't know the miracle of Christmas. I wonder if the world would know anything about the kenosis of Jesus Christ. I wonder if they would know anything about the doctrine of the hypostatic union of Jesus Christ. Do you suppose? Do you suppose if I gave you a test on it that you could know it? And yet we have had that here time and time again. That's Christmas. Not this sentimental nonsense that's going on today. That's Christmas. But not only that, Christmas is the struggle about who's going to rule. And Herod Antipas, Herod the Great, Herod Agrippa the First, and Herod Agrippa the Second all wanted to be king of the Jews. Who's going to rule? Jesus, the true king, or these folks? Who's going to rule in your heart and life at Christmas? The true King of Kings and Lord of Lords? Now, we have another wife here by the name of Cleopatra. Cleopatra gave Herod Philip. Philip was the tetrarch. When Herod died, he divided his kingdom up into 3 areas. The ethnarchy Archelaus got. The western tetrarchy, Herod Antipas got. That's west of Galilee. All right? Philip got the eastern part known as Iturea. And so therefore, Philip was known as the tetrarch. Now he is important because he is the one who married Salome. Now, basically, Philip was not a bad guy. He ruled for some 38 years, and he had no trouble in his kingdom at all. Caesarea Philippi is a city that he would have built, and named it after Caesar Augustus, of course. He had no children with Salome, but when Philip died, Salome remarried. She relocated to the mountain of Vesuvius, an interesting thing, with her child. That's where she met her death. Okay, we must hurry. Now we go to the fourth generation, where Aristobulus, before he was strangled to death of his father, and the daughter of Salome the first, Bernice the first, got married. And they produced 5 children. Herod of Chalcis, to whom Bernice was married for a short time. That was her uncle. Herod Agrippa the first, he is the guy who killed James and tried to kill Peter. Aristobulus, Herodias, which is one of the most famous women. She was the most beautiful and yet one of the most deadly. And then we have Mariamne the second. Now let me just go back here a minute to Herod Antipas. How did Herod Antipas die? Well, Herod Antipas and his wife Herodias died in the Pyrenees Mountains in South France. They were banished there by one of the Caesars, and they were banished there penniless, and they ended up starving to death. And of course, we'll talk about that in the after service. But I just wanted to tell you how he died. Herod the Great died with a disease. Herod Antipas died penniless. Then we come to Herod Agrippa the first. He too is the one who tried to kill the Apostle Peter. He was raised with a Jewish background, and despite that, he would not convert to Christianity. He was the one who stood up at Caesarea. Now, this is the one on the east coast of the Mediterranean, the west coast of Galilee. He stood up and said a speech in honor of the new Caesar. The Tyrian said, "It's the voice of God and not man." He said, "That's right, I'm a god." And the angel smote him, and he died of the same disease as Herod the Great. Now, Herodias, as I said, joined her husband in starving to death in south of France. All right, let's hurry on for the last of these. Agrippa the second. The after service will tell you exactly how he came to be ruler of all the area. It's interesting, at first he didn't have any area. Then he got Philip's tetrarchy. Then he got the tetrarchy of Antipas. Then he got the ethnarchy. Then actually they extended his kingdom onto the east of Jordan, known as the Transjordan area, and he got all of that. So as far as area is concerned, Agrippa II ruled more landmass than any of the other Herods. All of them were basically brilliant men. None matched Herod the Great, though. So anyway, he is the one who faced the Apostle Paul. He is the one who said, "Almost, Paul, you persuaded me to be a Christian." Almost. Paul said, "You know of this." He couldn't deny it. He understood everything Paul was saying and yet rejected Jesus Christ. You see, every single one of these men understood the message of the gospel. Herod got it by the Magi, and then by the word itself. In Bethlehem shall the Messiah be born. And yet he tried to kill Jesus Christ. Herod Antipas came face to face with Jesus Christ and still mocked him and set him to be crucified. Herod Agrippa heard the preaching of the Apostle Peter on the day of Pentecost and onward. Herod Agrippa II heard the message of Paul. All of them were confronted with the claims of Jesus Christ. All of them rejected Christ and died a horrible death because of Christmas and Herod's attitude toward Christmas, Herod the Great. What happened to Agrippa? He was made penniless as well, went back to Rome, and he died there of starvation, became insignificant in history. Bernice becomes significant because she was living with her brother, but when Vespasian and Titus came down to to war against Jerusalem, she was the mistress of Vespasian first, and he left her back there. And then she was the mistress of Titus II, the guy who destroyed the temple. She was the mistress of Titus. But when they wanted to get legitimately married, the Roman Senate wouldn't allow them, and she died of starvation in the gutters of Rome. Now, Drusilla and Mariamne are the ones that we want to talk about now as we end this time. Drusilla was married to Felix. Felix was robbing the Jews blind. He didn't rule very long because the Jews started complaining and they pulled him out of there for fear of another revolt. Drusilla went with him. But because Felix had robbed all these people, he had a lot of money. And he bought, as well as the husband of Salome, the richest farmland in the world at that time, on the hills of Mount Vesuvius. And in 79 A.D., both Salome and her child and Drusilla and her child were living there. What happened? 1,000 feet of the top of Vesuvius blew off. Archaeologists tell us that the people of Pompeii and the surrounding areas who were not killed in the explosion and earthquake faced a wall of lava that came toward them. Do you see the fitting end of these people? Before they went to hell, where they burned eternally in fire and brimstone, because of Herod's improper attitude toward Christmas, the fifth generation of the Herodian family was ended by burning in fire and brimstone before they were sent to hell. That's why, again, a message like this is so serious. Because look at our world today. Look at how people celebrate Christmas. What do they talk about? The glories of Jesus Christ. Is He their Lord? After the 25th, will they even recognize Him again to the Christmas season? Do they come to churches to learn Bible doctrine? Do they kneel at His feet? Is He Lord and Master of life? Of course He's not. The majority of the true Christians who have Bible doctrine are getting smaller and smaller, but the world still celebrates Christmas. What a mockery. Such idolatry. And all I dare say is that the fourth and fifth generation, I think, of where we're living now, is going to face something far worse than lava. What is it? Jesus Christ comes, and in the fullness of His glory, they will not recognize Him as Lord of this planet. With the fullness of His glory, He burns their flesh off their bones. With the false prophet and the Antichrist, He cast them alive into the lake of fire and brimstone. With the goat nations, those on His left hand, He said, enter eternal, everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Now that's the true story of Christmas. And unless Jesus Christ is your absolute Lord and Master, your celebrating Christmas doesn't amount to anything more than sheer sentimentalism, emotionalism, or idolatry. Looking to this little babe on the tree to produce something under the tree for your blessing. That sheer lust and idolatry. Why is it significant? What are we talking about as we close? The four generation family curse. Don't make any image. Don't bow down yourself to them. Do not serve them. And again, I could make the list of the images of Christmas. What's the first thing a child says when they think of Christmas? Well, I dare not say it because you will have, the vibes will be bad, the dagger stare. I don't care, because one of these days, Jesus Christ is going to ask you, what is the true image of Christmas? And you're going to say Santa, Rudolph, Frosty, and his little elves, and so forth. And He's going to say, wrong. What does the mechanic say? You either get your oil changed now, or I'm going to redo your engine. Either pay me now or pay me later. That's the way it's going to be. You're either going to acknowledge Christ as Lord now, or the Bible says that every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord to the glory of the Father. Either way. But it's easier now. But what will my family think? Who cares? What will the world think? Who cares? They're not going to last very long. They're not going to be around all the time. I guarantee you there's going to be one fellow who is, and that's Jesus Christ. The one whose birth they supposedly celebrate. All right. Fourfold generation curse. Don't make any image, bow down, serve it, for I am jealous. Goes back to Ashtaroth, the groves of the trees, the evergreen trees. And he said, I will, those who do this, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, that perpetuate the myth of Christmas.